Okay, I want to thank all of you for attending this session with the WellWaveNOW group. We are a group of people dedicated to transforming and improving the way that wellness and health is achieved and delivered in the U.S. and disrupt the current healthcare system a little bit. And now I want to stress on that part that, at least for myself, and speaking for myself, that I am a proponent of conventional health. And the care that it provides, I just believe that it needs to be complemented through an integrative approach. So sometimes our healthcare professionals don't have time to teach and to implement with us. And also, as a colleague of mine often says, our esteemed Breck, who's with us today, sometimes we got to take responsibility for ourselves. And so it's how do you get that leadership and that wellness that you want. So that's what we're here for today. And I want to introduce my colleagues a little bit more. I'll start with Breck. He is the founder of ServeRx. Has a long history of working in the pharmacy benefit management area. He's also the chairman of Brim Health, which is transforming the way that healthcare is delivered through pharmacies and other entities and to different geographic locations and underserved geographies and populations in our country. And he's also an adjunct professor. Also, through his work and his background, his dedication to helping people achieve their wellness and being free from pain and being free from poor medication interaction, he's developed a substantial following out on TikTok of well over 100,000 followers. So welcome, and I'm glad to be working with Breck. And then we've got Dr. Bob Levine. Dr. Bob Levine, like I often say, Bob is a great guy, a humble guy. But again, I will also say I want to keep him that way. So to our guest, who I thank for being here, I ask you to kind of help me plug Bob's ears if I talk about him a little bit. But Bob is if not the foremost, is one of the foremost people turned to for pain management in the United States and certainly and then in the world. He's been on Bloom TV, he's been on NBC, he's been called in for his expertise in those areas. He also served as the director for the Center of Integrated Wellness at the Henry Ford Health System for a good period of time. He's taken all that background and knowledge and turned that into a very integrated, great system of delivering wellness to individuals, and pleasure to have him with us and sharing his knowledge and helping the knowledge transfer. And we're not just about that wisdom and knowledge transfer here. Certainly all of us have offerings that you can engage us with on for services and some product. But what we want to be able to do is also provide real help in these sessions and real help for no cost. And so just to give you at least some techniques, a starting point, a little bit of a roadmap that you can go forward with and build upon and research and take real activity on that. And then I almost, as Breck always looks out for me, and he's kind of nodding at me again a little bit, saying, "Tim, you almost forgot to introduce yourself." So I'll take a little bit of time to introduce myself here. For over 16 years, so now in my 17th year, I've been dedicated on providing wellness and concentrating on providing wellness to the population. I got into that after an extensive career in technology, and I bring that understanding of technology to also find biotech solutions to be able to apply it and get into the hands of conventional health providers for better outcomes, and also deliver directly to individuals. But I also ran a home care agency for over 8 years, operated in 3 states, medical in 1 state. And that gave me great insight into the conditions people have, the things that could be avoided, integrative approaches to returning people to health. And so that is and that also led me into wellness plan management. Think of that like you have a financial planner that kind of helps you. So what do you invest in? How do you manage that? What are your outcomes? That's the same thing that I do from a wellness plan management, taking an integrated approach from our topic stress today through to support systems, to the right diet, the right exercise, the right tools to help you achieve your wellness objectives over time. But today we're going to talk about stress, and that is one of the key things that people work with and need to address. Saw an item as a statistic that it's always good to have for these type of discussions. NIH, National Institute of Health, said that over 75% of Americans experience in a week some symptoms, whether it's mental or physical, related to stress. And so when you look at the impact that stress has, it's not just something that you should shrug off, like I deal with a lot of retired professional athletes, and a number of them, whether male or female, like to position themselves as tough and strong and say, "I handle stress all the time." But that's a different type of stress. When you get into what we talk about, very acute or chronic stress, it can be detrimental to you physically, mentally, and socially. And so that's why I think it's important for us to spend some time figuring out how to address here. So, Bob or Breck, any comments from you?
Go ahead, Breck.
Yeah, well, I'll make a scary, stressful statistic here that just since the pandemic, we've seen the drug spend in this country go up by over $100 billion, and a lot of that has been in anti-anxiety and stress management, right? And so, man, there couldn't be a more perfect time for us to talk about this topic and come up with some holistic approaches, taking responsibility again for ourselves, to make some changes and to interrupt those stress patterns in our life, because uh, we all know the negative side effects of that, heart disease and stroke and weight gain, weight loss in some cases, but so many different health issues when you're carrying too much stress.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's really important that we address the underlying sources of stress and how to interrupt those stress reactions that people have. And it's just such an underlying stress is the number one killer for sure. And it's underneath every ill health condition. And my PhD is in pharmacology, and I've treated thousands of people in my career. And I can tell you that a lot of people don't even know when they're in stress. So it's really important for people to be aware of that, because if they're not aware of the stress they're under, they're just going to continue to move forward through their lives and experiencing all the negative effects. And one thing that I wanted to bring up briefly, we can talk about later, or even in our next session on stress that we do, is that stress reactions cause incredible adverse effects on the neuromuscular system, because the automatic stress reaction causes muscles to be tense, burn excess energy, cause postural misalignments. And so it's really important that people be able to let go of those stress reactions. So that's all I want to say about that for now. We can talk about that a little bit more later.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. So we'll now move into the main part of our discussion. And if I didn't before, I want to cue our guests that if you've got questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to respond to them not on an ongoing basis. As we get towards the end here, we'll reserve those questions, and we'll give you the comments and feedback on it. Thanks.
D1 athlete in your day. So yeah, I would love to hear more about your background, Tim.
Well, I thank you for Bracken asking that. I sure did. So for me, so I do consider myself a wellness technologist focused on biotech wellness and high tech to provide the my technology background and providing solutions that help people live better for longer, achieve wellness. But also, that pulled me into what I call wellness plan management. For retired professional athletes, often for executives, and for the elderly. After spending 8 years, and as an elderly, it started me on my journey of really focusing for the last 16 years on wellness, working with them. But so as I mentioned earlier, I'm a believer in conventional medicine, but they need to be complemented, both in terms of helping understand what's the right food, how do you handle stress, what's the right type of exercise, and the people really need to take leadership themselves and going from just health, which the conventional people can help with, to overall wellness and thriving. So my background is in health coaching, wellness planning management, wellness technology, caring for the elderly, which is really gave me a lot of information on stress, on various conditions, and working with them, and all those type of things. So that's my relevant background on this. So thank you, Bracken.
Yeah, no, appreciate you giving us some more background. You stated early on that you're certainly an advocate of conventional medicine. I've spent over 20 years in that space, and one thing that I've learned though is that we're amazing at acute care, and what I mean by that is that if you have a broken bone, if that bone is out of place, no amount of meditation, prayer, healing stones, supplement is going to put that bone in place. We need an orthopedic knows what they're doing to set that, put it back in place. And antibiotics obviously is the very first initial big pharma breakthrough in having, penicillin and being able to take care of infections that way. So we do a great job at that acute care. It's the chronic care and chronic care management that I think we really can fall on our face, and especially if we're dependent upon medications, and that's what's made so many followers follow my content is really the philosophy that if the side effects outweigh the benefits, you really need to do something different. And every medication, no matter how much good it's doing, it also comes with its unfortunate side effects as well. And Dr. Bob, you know a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, now before Bob caught me here on mute, Dr. Bob, and so as you come in on that, I gotta say one thing, Brett, on that, because I span the whole spectrum from very, very conventional, to another one. The only thing I agree with you 99.9%. Prayer might have fixed that bone.
Wow, that's a bold statement, Tim.
Yeah, yeah.
The fervent, now not to hurt anybody else's beliefs or where they're at, but it says the fervent prayer of the righteous availeth much, and these greater things than I will you do. And so healed the maimed, lame. So prayer might have done it. Everything else,
Might have.
absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
might have. I'll give you that.
All right. I'm sorry, Bob.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think we should probably move into the stress portion of this, so we get, so we really get into the topic, Tim. And you were going to start us off, weren't
Well,
you?
why don't you take us into it? I alluded to it earlier, Bob, and I just want your viewpoint. Breck's right. That I don't think stress is something should be shrugged off. So I think there are mental, physical, and social impacts of stress. And Bob, I know you deal with all three aspects of those, come across it. Why don't you share your views on that, if you would, Bob?
I think the most important thing to realize about stress is that it's generated from inside us. We generate the stress that we don't want to have, the stress that creates ill health, the stress that causes all kinds of problems within our bodies, within our minds, within our spirits. So when people understand that, wow, I'm generating my own stress all the time that I have stress, then they can recognize they have the power to change that. They have the power to interrupt their own generation of stress. And that's where the work that I do comes in, because I want people to be able to identify their automatic stress reactions that they have not been able to help when they've started to have these automatic reactions. I teach them to recognize that. I think it's really important that people recognize when they're in stress and then have some way of interrupting the stress. So, that stress creates such unwanted effects on the body. I mean, as you said, Tim, I think that the statistic is that more than 90% of all physician visits have a stress-related component to it. So that's a big deal. So I'm going to start off with that, Tim, just by saying that for our listeners, it's really important to know that all stress is generated from inside us, unless we're getting hit by a bus and it's an external stress. But all stress is generated from within us. And then we have the power to interrupt that generation of stress, no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I concur with that it's generated from within, but I think you also brought up one point that I often work with my clients on. It's good to kind of recognize when you're under stress. And so, sometimes it's a racing heartbeat of things of that nature, but there are other things that people I think need to look for and say, I'm under stress, to say, when do I make that intervention as part of it when it comes to that? And I think that's the thing, you see things such as mood fluctuations, behavioral changes, if they've got racing thoughts, sleep deprivation, if you can't get the right amount, if you can't get the sleep and things of that nature, it can be just a sense of dread, of anxiety, of not being able to cope. I think those are some of the symptoms, not certainly not all of them, but some of the things to look for to say, am I under stress, so that you can then start, when you need to make that intervention with that.
Yeah, I think that stress is underneath every unwanted result that we have. Like if we wake up in the middle of the night and we say, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, that's a automatic stress reaction. And if we understand that, we can interrupt that, and we can essentially figure out a way to go back to sleep. And I use guided meditation a lot, audio tracks from my clients, because with guided meditation audio tracks, guided simply means it's language based. So we're using language to help harness the power of the mind, and teach people we use guided meditation for accelerated learning, for enhanced retention of information, and it makes a huge difference. So that's one of the ways that I help people interrupt their automatic stress reactions, understanding what they are and then how to interrupt them.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
you
think
bring up a really good point about sleep, right? I've used this example often that in my younger years, if I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked at the clock and I saw that it was, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I was like, oh, great. I get another 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I'm all excited to roll over and go back to sleep. Now, in my later years, I look at the clock and it's 3 a.m. and I'm like, oh, dang it. I'm going to be awake now for the rest of the night. So it's really that mindset, right?
Mhm.
That's a beautiful comment. If I could say something else, Tim, I wanted to
Mhm.
say that Breck just illustrated brilliantly uh, one of the approaches that I've used with clients, which is called a future visioning process, right? So in Breck's younger years, his future visioning process, when he woke up in the middle of the night, was fantastic. I got 3 more hours of sleep. Wow, I'm just going to roll over and go back to sleep. Most people don't do that. Most people, as especially as we get older, we get into this automatic pattern of, uh-oh, we're in trouble, or we're going to be low energy in the morning. And I call that a corrupt future vision compared to the true future vision of wow, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I have this great way of just going back to sleep, rolling over, and I'm going to sleep deeply for the rest of the night. I'm going to be fully energized in the morning. That would be the true future vision, what we want to have happen. So when people learn about this future visioning process, we can easily, let's just say, revert back to the early days of Breck when we can say, yeah, this is great. I'm just gonna have a wonderful rest of the night sleep. It's okay. We smile, roll over, take a nice deep breath, and go back to sleep. And if we want to, we can listen to a guided meditation audio track. I've given people, 15-minute tracks, and in the middle of the night, they hear about 30 seconds and they're asleep again. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
wonderful
And
thing.
I agree with that. Something that helped me as my sleep changed a little bit, or a couple of things. One, I found out that centuries ago, they used to have what they call first sleep because people went to bed earlier anyway. They'd wake up and they'd do a little thing for a couple of hours, and then they'd go back and get their second sleep. So then, that took away a lot of the anxiety and pressure on me when I started waking up. And then number two, then what I started doing, Bob, just a little bit what you alluded to, is I've got two things I love to do. I like to do the Wordle from New York Times, and they've got another one called the Spelling Bee. So when I pop up at 3:30, I say, I can get my jump on the spelling. I finish my first sleep, I get my jump on the spelling bee, I do the Wordle, and then, boy, I go back to sleep afterwards. And I feel like I've
Nice.
accomplished something. So I like the pattern interruption. I also, and I going back to something you said earlier, Bob, alluded to, said everything is such as internal. However, I do like to say that there are sources of stress that people in reacting to generate that internal stress. And I
Yeah.
like people to be able to understand what those, like, sort of the list of it. We don't have a time to go through the full list of it, but I think
The
understand,
stressors.
yeah, understand those things, and it's common things like we all talk about. It can be work, it can be financial, it can be family, but there's health causes, there's time crunches and things of that nature. And I'll dive into the time crunch once a little bit. And I know you and I have had this debate, and don't be polite on this one, Bob, where I think you can avoid or repel stress. And I take the time crunch as an example. How can I avoid a time crunch, stressor? Well, I used to be back in my high tech days for a very large company. And the early part of that, I was an executive project manager. Part of that executive project manager is you have to estimate the tax. You have a time take, so who's responsible for it. So if I can plan things out and manage myself, I don't believe you can manage time. You can manage yourself, and I manage myself. I get myself out of the time crunch, and I can avoid it. Similarly, and so that's just one example. I think, we're going around him a little bit, and I'll get back, but I have a three-prong approach to dealing with stress that I like to teach, which is that avoid or repel. it's strengthening yourself so you can handle more of it without being detrimental. We still got to talk a little about the impacts. I appreciate your earliest comment that everything's just internal, but you can handle the stress better. And then number three, if it does get in, some of the things you talk about, how do you eliminate it? Your pattern, your pattern recognition, your pattern changes, things of that nature.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. Amazingly enough, we agree on this. Tim and I have spirited discussions about these things. So yeah, certainly you want to set your life up so that you minimize the exposure to the triggers that trigger these automatic stress reactions. And yet, it's fantastic to know that when a trigger shows up, you can interrupt it in 2 seconds. Like if you experienced 120 stressor incidents a day and it took you 2 seconds to interrupt each one, that would be 240 seconds, 4 minutes. Spend 4 minutes a day in stress, and the rest of the day you're free of stress. That's what I look for, and that's what I coach people on. And so, just so avoiding the triggers is fantastic. And when the trigger comes, just be ready to deal with it powerfully.
Right. Breck, any comments you want to add in there?
Well, I was going to ask a question. What are some good interruptions? What are the, when stress is triggered, what are the interruptions that can be easily,
Yeah, and
put in place?
Thanks. I'll let Bob comment. That I have one pop to mind for me. There's a guy named Mark Januszewski that has what I call you can find his book on Amazon. He's where I learned this from, and I'll give that attribution to that. And he has what he's called the 7 laws of the mind. The 7 laws of the mind were really meant more towards being able to put the mind and put yourself in a bit of creativity, of maximum performance. But part of that is getting rid of stress. And one of the laws of the mind I work with my clients on, to your point, is the law of substitution, which is as soon as a negative thought comes in, you take the work thought, boy, I'm going to get fired. You can automatically substitute something else for that. Whether it's from, hey, best thing in the world might be for me to get fired because then I can go find the really work environment I really want. Or, I can turn this situation around. And that gets the first example gets into a second law of the mind, which is called the law of dual thought, which means I can assign any property I want to any thought that comes into my mind. So to me, that's one good way of it is combining those two. Substitute immediately, a bad thought for a negative thought, or two, assign what's potentially a negative thought, assign a great property to it. I lose my job, great. I can spend more time with my kid for the 3 months while I find the best job in the world for me, that type of thing. Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah. By the way, I want to remind our listeners that if you have a question, throw it in the chat, okay? So we can answer that because we have about 5 more minutes left, roughly. And a question that has already come in is, what are some it's along the line of what we're talking about. What are some concrete ways that we can absolutely handle the stress or interrupt the stress or be free of it in the moment, right? So to answer that question, I always say that to make a change. So if you make a change in anything in life, okay, whatever it is, you want to go from stressed out to no stress. It requires 2 things. It requires new awareness, right? New recognition of the right type. So that's why I always say automatic pattern recognition. You got to recognize that the stress is there without recognizing. And a lot of people don't recognize that they're under stress. They don't realize it. And so that's a long-term killer because, it's just wreaking havoc in the body, mind, spirit. So recognition is really critical. And then the second thing you need is an effective change strategy, because without an effective change strategy, you're stuck in the pattern. You're in the pattern, and that can lead to a lot of suffering. So what would be one example of an effective change strategy? So I'm going to give one. After we recognize that the stress is there, we want to use our breath to trigger us to shift ourselves. So we're going to use our breath. We're going to take a breath. We're going to have the intention of shifting away from the stress. Like, oh, I recognize that I'm in a stressful situation. We want to take a breath. We want to congratulate ourselves. Wow, I recognize it. Fantastic. Because that's the key thing, recognizing it. And then having the commitment to saying, okay, now I'm being relaxed and I'm being peaceful, like that. fast. And you'd be shocked at how well that can work. Recognition of the pattern, recognition of the expression of the automatic stress reaction, and then taking a breath, having the intention of shifting to being, I'm going to say relaxed and peaceful would be what I would recommend. Shifting to being relaxed and being peaceful. That can be so effective for people. So, give that a try when you're out and about and there's a trigger comes along and you experience stress. See how that works for you.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question here, Bob. Been lied to it. It says, should you try to manage your stress in buckets, personal, financial, work, family? Is there a good way to manage the attacks? And so I'm going to play off a little bit what you said there, Bob, because that gets into your way of how you like to eliminate the stress, interrupt the stress, and so you've got some thoughts on that. Then I'll go back into what I work into is how do you avoid, repel, and strengthen yourself to it. So, and when I look at those, and the person who asked that question, that gets back into, what are those? Yes, agreeing with you, Bob, it all comes internal, but there are some catalysts to that, and he's really talking about a lot of the catalysts to that. I like to have with those catalysts, then you can have a plan for it, not necessarily handling them in buckets, but if you say, this is what, if it's financial, say this is financial with me. One of the ways to handle that stress is to have the financial plan. What is your financial planner? What is your advisors? Things of that nature. I think you have to then, let's say if it's a family or something else going on, what's your support structure? Who do you turn to? Who can you talk to? Is it a spiritual advisor? Is it a friend? I think you've got to have your game, getting back to the sports world, when I do with retired athletes, I tell them, if you take the sources of stress, if you take the symptoms of stress, you then are able to recognize what your opponent's doing, what play it's running. And so you have to have your own game plan. You have to have a different defense for a different play. And so you've got to put those all together. So anticipate those, have your financial plan together, have your support structure together, who you turn to. And then, yes, like you said, have your techniques for those interruptions, but then also strengthen yourself to them so you can handle that. We didn't still really talk to the physical, but just real quickly, stress really can be a killer. It can lead to heart attacks. It can lead to the cardiovascular. It can lead to strokes. It can heighten digestive systems. So I think you also have to have a way of strengthening your body, to those things, and that's the right exercise. It's mix up the exercise. It's not just strength training. It's not just, boy, when I have stress, I'm going to run 5 miles. You got to have the cardio. You got to have the resistance training in there. You got to the right diet helps your body undertake those things. So to that question, what I say is, one, to me, it's have your 3-part plan. How do I avoid these? How do I plan for them? How do I manage them so I don't get a crisis? How do I strengthen myself to them? And then, yes, how do I eliminate them? If they get through all that, they're still getting to me. But when it goes, Brett talked about acute versus chronic. Acute can kill you, but chronic can also wear you down, destroy it. So how do you address it when it's acute to prevent it from becoming ongoing from a chronic standpoint?
Yeah. So to me, whatever the trigger is, whether it's work, financial, family, it requires an interruption. Now, in terms of, I say that almost all stress comes through communication and language. So, interpersonal communication is a big deal, and it's really important to understand that. So when you get into a conversation and starts to go south, let's say it starts to go in a direction that you really don't want it to go in, it's really important to recognize that. That's the recognition component, and then it's time to pause and see how we're communicating in a way that's not working for the other person, because we have to figure out a way to interrupt these automatic language-based stress reactions where we're communicating with somebody, they're communicating back to us, and it's just not working well. So that's really, really important. And I think that stress in relationships and communication, also when I said it's in communication and language, the language of thought. Thoughts are based in language, and a lot of people have thoughts that they would rather not have, thoughts that keep them up at night, thoughts that have them worry, right? And there's a whole way of explaining where all that comes from. we don't have the opportunity to discuss that right now, but just to understand that it's the awareness of, wow, these thoughts are not working for me. How do one of the techniques, there are many techniques, but the one about the breath, the intention, okay, I'm shifting my thoughts, I'm shifting my way of being from worried and anxious to being relaxed, being peaceful. The thoughts start to change. And so thoughts change, the way we communicate with others change. When we're being loving instead of being irritated in communication, that's really important. So I just want to bring that aspect of about language, because the language and the communication is so important to help interrupt automatic stress reactions.
Right. And another thing I want to play off there is the communication, the way we react changes. Because one of the other detrimental impacts of stress, and why it's serious, is you're being under stress, you can destroy your social relationships. You can destroy a marriage. You can destroy the relationship between you and your children and your parents and work environment. So really being able to understand that communication, change that philosophy, know when you're underneath stress is just absolutely key to me for social relationships, the physical impact and the mental impact. Yeah, because it can also affect. Um, Appreciate Brett kicking through the background from background being a decent Division I athlete, of being a executive in a large corporation that was having financial problems and people were clamping down on it. And literally having people don't often think. I know one of our guests will appreciate this. Even in the home care world, sometimes personal care versus medical, I can define at some point in time. People don't quite realize you still have the life of people in your hands, and that can be be stressful. So I think you've got to be able to handle all those. Having been through all that is where I came through, and having worked with others is where I came through my techniques and came to that appreciation. Is that you've got to approach things like Bob has talked to, and some of the things I've spoken to as well.
Yeah. Comment in the chat was great information, and also helps to know who, what, and where the triggers are. And one thing that I'll add to that is it's also important to take 100% responsibility for your own feelings too, right? We can't blame everything on everyone else, the environment, the circumstance, the marriage I'm in, the family I'm in. We have to take personal responsibility for that, and that goes the same with our medications too, right? We created this microwave society where everyone wants instant gratification. Well, there's a pill for that. I want to just pop a pill. No, you need to take responsibility for yourself and make sure that you're really doing the things that are best for you and not the easy way out.
Absolutely. Very well said.
All right. So we started a little about 4 minutes late, and so we're running about 6 minutes over. So our time is about wrapped up here.
Tim, I just want to thank everybody for being with us, and we could talk about stress for hours, and maybe we'll have another session on stress as we go forward. And this being our initial broadcast, we're going to be building this with other interesting health topics, and so I just wanted to say that we could spend a lot more time on stress. There's a lot more that we could do. I just want to, Tim.
Well, one thing, absolutely. So I just put in the chat, and you, Breck, of course, and Bob, you're welcome to as well. But I volunteered my email address because people had questions to come and more of that. And we had talked about next week moving on to pain management, but maybe we should dive more into stress. What's Breck, Bob? What are you feeling? Should we do a return on stress, or should we move into our first in our series on pain management?
I think Breck, you go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd love to do one more week of covering stress, because there's so much more we could talk about and so many more people we could help. And so, yeah, I think one more week on this topic would be great. So this same time next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, okay,
this same link,
guys.
this same link works, right, Tim?
Yes. Well, no, I think it'll be a different one. So, because
we'll send out the invitations again, right?
The invitations again.
Yeah, I'm putting my information in the chat before we close up here. I'm trying to finger type this in, and I put my email address, and I put my link to my digital business card so people can check that out. There's a lot of really good information on there.
Yeah.
And I'm sticking my cell phone number in there too, so that if somebody wants to, get a consult or discuss this a little bit more, I'd be happy to talk to them about it. And yeah, so
Yeah. And so we're all on, most of you got the invitation through LinkedIn, some got through Facebook, and Breck just put one up there. But you feel free, you've got contact information here. Feel free to also reach out to us on LinkedIn and connect that way. And then I know I'm going to do an early disclosure on Bob. He wanted me to hold this one tight too, but I'm not going to do it. Bob knows that one. So Bob and I are both working on individually, maybe collectively we'll do one, we merge, but on some educational courses on stress management and things of that nature that will soon be out there that you can take a look at. But again, yes, sure, we like to do that for impact to reach things out there, but also your feedback on this session, I'd like folks to put in there is key, because we all want to give away things at no charge that can be of real help and techniques. Now, it may require the listener to go out and do a little more research, but at least give them a roadmap, to give them a starting point, to be able to say, this is what I can research, this is what I can go and learn for myself to apply, so that it's real help for those individuals. And so anything that you'd like to provide us comment on, to say, do this, do that, to be a real help, feel free to get those, and we would welcome and appreciate those.
Yeah,
And
no,
also
I'm gonna
put in-
have some. I'm gonna have some programs as well. I was talking to Bob about that earlier, and this might actually stress somebody out if they're 96, 98 years old to add another decade to your life. But for most of us, it would be a good thing to write how to add a decade to your life. So I have a health risk assessment that'll be totally free, that anyone is able to go in and take and just check and see where you're at, and add another 8-10 years.
Beautiful. Yeah, Breck,
Fantastic.
you and I have talked about, I call that the Moses plan. I believe both scientifically and in my religious beliefs that people were meant to live 120 years, and that's the span. And on that 120th year, just like Moses, they ought to be able to climb the mountain, still climb up a very strenuous mountain, and then say, well, look across, and I'm done. And so that's so now it's how do you get there?
I'm going to be climbing down after I climb up. I'm not done at the top. I'm going, and then I'm going to walk another 40 or 50 miles after that. I just wanted to, Tim, you spoke about free information. I just wanted to I put in the chat. By the way, remember to save the chat. There's 3 buttons, 3 dots up at the top now. They changed that, where you can save the chat. And so if you're looking for some free information, I have a link. It's meetdrbob.com, meetdrbob.com. And there you can get some free information on chronic back pain, stress, and some other things. So go ahead and check that out if you like. And I hope you like it. Hope it's worthwhile for. I know it'll be valuable for you.
All right. So I'd like adding my thanks to all our guests for joining us here. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege to have this communication with you.
Yep.
Thanks
Thanks,
for
everyone.
being with us. Yeah, take care, everybody.